some reports coming out of Newcastle this morning that Steve Bruce is going to be replaced. It's not a great shock to anybody. I think he thought it. I think everybody thought it was going to go on. Yourself and Brucey would have, you'd have been good mates down the years, Kenny.
No, I wouldn't have been a good mate. I wouldn't have been a good mate with any of your managers. To be honest with you, that's generally the case. It's kind of a professional relationship you have with most of your managers. So, yeah, I think he's in trouble. That's kind of pretty obvious. I'm sure they'll come out. Amanda Stavely, as I think, is the kind of face of the kind of consortium who's bought the football club. I'm sure she'll be saying all the right things and assuring the manager, and there'll be no knee-jerk decisions being made in the immediate future. I'm sure that will be the case over the next kind of weeks and probably a couple of months, Adrian. But you just sense as if you get to that kind of window, maybe Christmas, New Year's, when things settle down a little bit. You wouldn't be surprised then if maybe phone calls are being made, if they're not even being made at the moment, to managers, agents, and maybe potentially things are being lined up for the new year. That's to be fair. That's not necessarily a reflection on maybe Steve Bruce and his.
Well, he's not going to be if all these unbelievable sums of money are coming into the club, and they are. Everybody, including himself, accepts that he is not going to be the one on the end of the line to Erling Haaland. He might well be onto Erling Haaland and Kylian Mbappe. That's not going to be. Everybody knows that's not Steve Bruce's gig.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think when you look at it, I think timing a little bit as well. I remember like a year ago looking around the football landscape in terms of managers, and there seemed to be like about half a dozen some of the top managers out of a job. Kind of there for the taking. Pochettino was on gardening leave, wasn't he? Obviously the previous Juventus manager who's jumped back into the job. Allegri, exactly. Was available. It's probably only Antonio Conte, to be honest with you, man, which kind of screams at you, and that'd be a very interesting one, because I'm a big fan of Conte, to be honest with you, and I think he's good. He's a great manager on a lot of different levels. I think he's a very good coach. In how he sets up his teams. I think he's a kind of strong personality, and I think one of the reasons why he jumped obviously into Milan, he had a couple of great seasons there. I think what he did there was fantastic in such a short period of time. But obviously, word came down the chain that he had to get rid of a few players there. There was no room for further investment in the squad, and he'd had enough. And he's the one for me at the moment. If you're looking at getting somebody in of real kind of stature, not just stature, but kind of real quality, he's the one for me. And it'd be interesting to see, if any phone calls are made in his direction, to the extent of, look, just sit. Are you prepared to sit for a few months? There could potentially be a job for you here if you're patient enough. Maybe in the new year, but he's certainly one for me who absolutely screams out in terms of about a natural fit, like, you know what I mean. But someone of real top quality.
Chatter about Stevie G. Obviously, he might be one of the early favourites, I think, for it. Based on the work that he's doing, obviously at Rangers. With dealing with that sums of money, you're suddenly at one of the, if not the richest club in the world. Slightly different kettle of fish, Kenny, when you're dealing with that level of player and that level of budget.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is an interesting one. Yeah, I've been impressed with the job he's done up there. I've got to be honest with you. It's not as if he went up there, lads, wasn't. There was a huge war chest there available to him.
Yeah, but is that not like there's nothing in that then to recommend him almost for this job? Like, he's not used to dealing
No, sorry, couldn't energy. No, but for me, it's more important in terms you're looking at a manager in terms of what he can do with the squad that he has available to him. Can he tap into the squad and get the very best out of players available to him? If he's good at that, and that means in terms of how you set up your team, the tactical setup of the team, how you deal with the players on a one-to-one basis. Can you pull the kind of dressing room together, team environment, all of those things. If you can do that, regardless, the quality of players in the dressing room, for me, that's the most important thing. If you can do that, you can pretty much do it at any level with any type of player. Now, I know big egos come into it the higher you go up, and the players that you bring in, kind of world class players. But if you have that ability to kind of win a dressing room over and get the very best out of the players you have available to you, for me, that's first and foremost what you're looking for. And I think he's done that, to be fair to my Rangers. Well, from afar anyway. I haven't been watching it that closely. But I like the way he speaks. I like the way he's set up his team, and I think he's done a really good job up there for his first managerial post. I think it's a natural fit. I think it's only a matter of time for me when he bounces back to Anfield. That's a given for me. So I think it's I'm interested with Gerrard in terms of how. First of all, in terms of how Liverpool perceive him, in terms of where they feel he needs to be in his managerial career before they'll take him back to Anfield. Is it sufficient for him to park himself in Glasgow, Adrian, for another 2 or 3 years, get more experience, more European experience with Rangers, a couple of more league titles, wherever it is? Will that be sufficient for the owners at Liverpool then to say in 2 or 3 years' time, when invariably Klopp departs, that's sufficient now, that body of work you've done at Glasgow, that's enough now, we'll take you? Or whether they feel, and maybe Gerrard feels, I need to go and bounce from Rangers into another environment, maybe a more demanding environment to an extent, Newcastle, maybe that, and prove myself there and build something there at Newcastle, and maybe then further down the road that'll be his avenue back to Liverpool. Don't know how you two lads see it.
I was going to ask, what do you think is the more likely of those two things? Because to me it does seem that it's the second of those two situations where Gerrard will think maybe he just need one more job just to persuade the hierarchy at Anfield, because he's a level above, I think, at this point where Lampard was before taking Chelsea. But I still think is there a whiff around that sort of ex-player getting appointed still after Lampard at Chelsea, and let's see what happens with Solskjaer at Manchester United, and to a certain extent Arteta at Arsenal. You can't really say any of those three have worked out brilliantly yet, that they've all sort of learned on the job. And I wonder, does Gerrard get put into that category now, but doesn't get put in that category if he takes one more job and actually succeeds?
Well, Lampard could have gone to Rangers and done what Stevie G is doing. We just don't know, right? There is a middle ground of, on your point, if Gerrard does need to go to an Aston Villa or to another club, doesn't he, really, before, Liverpool are not going to, despite his club status as a club legend, surely taking a punt. They'll be taking a major punt. With all due respect, I'd be saying the same if he was managing Celtic.
Yeah, I disagree with you, to be honest with you, for the reasons that I've said. I think a dressing room is a dressing room, and I don't see a huge amount of difference between a dressing room in Newcastle, Aston Villa, or Glasgow Rangers Football Club. Those things that I'm talking about in terms of managerial qualities, in terms of man management, how you deal individually with the players, with the group itself, the tactical setup of the team, your understanding of the game, how you perceive it, and how you can put a team together and really get the very best of the players you have available to you. I mean, that for me is the absolute key, and I think he's come close to that at Glasgow, and I think he's getting better every year. I think European experience as well will help, and that'll kind of help his development as a manager. I think he's a strong character, Gerrard. He seems to have that bit of, whatever it is, belligerence there's there, isn't he? You can kind of get a bit of a sense of it. I think the kind of personality traits are there for him to walk into a club like Liverpool and have an impact. And I think there's actually, from his point of view, there's real risk in terms of making a jump to somewhere like Newcastle or somewhere else, for potential for it to go badly wrong. I think he was being a little bit clever. I think for me, it'd probably be better advised to sit where he is and stay on that horse up in Glasgow and see how successfully it can be there. And I think for me that's sufficient if he continues on his kind of upward trajectory that he's on at Glasgow Rangers. I think for me there's a strong argument there that's enough, that's sufficient for Liverpool. There's always a calculated risk, lads, isn't there, in terms of young managers. You mentioned a few of them there. You talk about Lampard. I wouldn't consider Lampard necessarily a failure. I'm still a big fan of Frank Lampard. I think he can kind of bounce back and still be successful. But yeah, that kind of transfer, that managerial kind of merry-go-round, would be interesting kind of going forward. Gerrard, Conte, and that Newcastle position, because that's a job which every manager will be kind of salivating over.